what are 3 things that you want to do in Washington if you're reelected that you either have done during your first term or want to see done in the future?
Well, continue to fight for Iowa just overall, but a few things that I would like to continue to do is always fighting for our farmers, making sure that we are upholding the renewable fuel standard, very important, working on those trade agreements, etc. Always working for veterans. I am a combat veteran and I've had my boots in that sand, and I understand the sacrifices that our veterans and their families have made for this nation. And then, of course, always standing up for our working families as well. Our economy was booming before COVID-19. We've had a rough go in Iowa and all across the United States. So continuing to work to make sure that our working families have a fighting chance at prosperity. So there's just a few things I could go on and on and on about the work I've been doing in the United States Senate, but just honored to have that opportunity.
So I want to touch on agriculture specifically, because Iowa farmers have faced a tough year with drought and dry weather, and then the derecho in central and eastern Iowa, and the global pandemic. Kind of what's your plan in the Senate to kind of help them through the next couple of years after a year like none other?
Yes, and it has been a very difficult time for our farmers. Fortunately, we have been able to get a number of packages done through the CARES Act during COVID recovery timeframe this year. We've seen the derecho, and I've worked with the administration and the agencies to provide relief for our farmers through those efforts as well. But long term, again, to keep us moving in the right direction, it is about expanding our markets, making sure we have access to other countries and getting our commodities overseas. So I am very, very thankful that we have the USMCA in place, number 1 and 2 trade partners with Canada and Mexico. We have Japan, our number 3 trade partner. We've secured a deal with them as well. And number 4 trade partner, China, phase 1. We have to continue to build upon those agreements, and that will, in the long term, help our farmers. We also, though, have to uphold the RFS. This is important, and you see a number of moves by both Democratic members of the Senate and the House and others that are trying to do away with the internal combustion engine, which means no biofuels, period. So this is an issue, and I think our farmers need to think about that as they are casting their votes.
And ethanol and biofuels are huge for Iowa, as is, corn and soybeans. And if reelected, the Farm Bill is going to come up in the next term. So kind of what does that entail for you as a sitting senator who's maybe been through this before? What does the Farm Bill mean for you for the next election or the next Senate for the next 5-10 years or generations to come for Iowa farmers?
Yes, the Farm Bill is setting the stage for not just Iowa agriculture, but American agriculture. And it is something that I've already been through a Farm Bill and have contributed to that Farm Bill, worked on a number of conservation projects with other members, including Democrats, worked on a dairy issue for Iowa's dairy farmers and was able to get that included in the last Farm Bill as well. So there's a lot of different areas that we will continue to work on. We must maintain crop insurance. That is extremely important. That is something that I will be fighting for, making sure that we do have conservation dollars available for our farmers, because we do want to keep our soils and our water healthy. So those are important projects. And then, of course, we have an additional component of the Farm Bill where we deal with issues like food insecurity and making sure that children have healthy meals. So that is part of what I will be engaging in as well. But already been through a Farm Bill and had a number of significant wins for Iowans included in that. And I look forward to serving Iowa again on the Ag Committee and working through many more Farm Bills.
So turning from agriculture, healthcare is also a big issue on the Iowa ballot this year, especially in rural Iowa. So what's your plan to kind of help keep rural hospitals open and rural healthcare available to those in our small Iowa communities?
Yes, thank you. Healthcare is a significant issue, and maintaining those rural healthcare systems is very, very important. So, as we're looking at different plans, ways that we can move forward, we're already working with a number of those hospitals and their associations on a plan that would at least allow some of those systems to move to more of an outpatient treatment type model rather than an inpatient treatment model. So we already have the ball rolling in that direction. That's really exciting for a number of those smaller hospitals that could be closed if they're not given that opportunity. I would say, though, that the Democrats have proposed a number of healthcare alternatives that could actually bankrupt our rural healthcare systems. My opponent has proposed the public option. She said she supports that. And an independent study was done that said that plan could literally bankrupt up to 52 of Iowa's rural healthcare systems. So again, we've got to find ways to remain viable in the rural communities. So making sure that we have different types of healthcare systems, which would include our community health centers as well. I am a huge proponent of our CHCs. They provide the gap for those that maybe aren't able to access larger healthcare systems. And there's many ways we can be supportive in that area.
And with COVID-19 kind of currently, we're in month 8 with COVID-19 here in the US, especially here in Iowa. We're seeing our cases rise again. How can you protect those with pre-existing conditions? Because we don't know what's going to come from COVID-19.
We don't, and so that is one thing that I have been adamant about. And don't let the opposition in this election tell you any different. I am adamant that we must provide health care coverage for those that have pre-existing conditions. So bottom line, understanding we have so many Iowans that have been struck by COVID-19, they will need care in the future as well. I have individuals in my own family that have pre-existing conditions, so I know how important this is. I do have plans available out there. One of the plans that I have supported would provide backstops from the federal government, which would allow those with pre-existing conditions to access the same type of health care that everyone else has at the same rates. It would be that the federal government, though, picks up any additional costs when it comes to those that have medically complex situations. So believe me, folks, we have a number of alternatives out there, but we must cover people with pre-existing conditions.
Turning to our military veterans, and as a veteran yourself, you can relate to what these guys are going through. What do you hope to accomplish in another term in the Senate for our veterans and our service members?
Yes, we have significant issues. I'm not on the Veterans Affairs Committee, but I do provide significant input into that committee. I do serve on the Armed Services Committee, so working with those that are actively serving. But when it comes to our veterans, we must uphold the commitments that have been made to those veterans. And again, as a combat veteran, someone who served with 150 of our great Iowa Army National Guardsmen overseas, it is very important to me that we are providing what necessities they need should they incur any difficulties, any injuries while serving our great state and nation. So upholding that commitment is important. What we also need to focus on and continue to focus on is military sexual assault and military sexual trauma. This is an area I've been actively engaged in combating the entire 6 years that I have been in the United States Senate, and will continue to do so. Treatment of traumatic brain injury. This is an area where I've partnered with my Democratic friends. Elizabeth Warren actually co-sponsored a bill with me dealing with that traumatic brain injury in veterans. So I'm just very proud to work in a bipartisan way on so many of these wonderful issues.
And speaking of bipartisan, there is a lot of divisiveness on both sides of the aisle here. How can that be fixed going into this past November 3rd and past this election campaign? How can both sides start working together in the Senate and in Congress in general?
Yes, and I know that there is a perception that we don't work together on certain issues, but let me dispel that rumor. There are some big items that we disagree very much on, but there are so many other issues that we work so well together. And I'll give an example. I sit on the Public Works Committee as well, and we worked on an infrastructure package, a plussed up infrastructure package, and you will find very different senators on that committee that have very diverse thought patterns. But we were able to pass out this $287 billion infrastructure package 21-0. And so it does show that there are things that we can work on together. And I am very proud to be ranked by Georgetown University as one of the most bipartisan senators from any state of either party in the last 25 years. I'm very proud of that. I really do enjoy working with a number of our Democrats in the United States Senate. And I truly do believe if you have a passion about something, it shouldn't matter if it's an R or a D or an I behind a person's name. If you have a passion and that other person shares that passion, we should be working on it together.
Just a few more questions. So you've been in the Senate hearings for Amy Coney Barrett, and you were talking about women's rights and the freedom of being a woman in America and how we create our own path. And as a veteran and as the first female U.S. Senator from Iowa, what's your message to the women of Iowa who are going to be casting their ballot on November 3rd?
Absolutely. I've said this, and I know a lot of women that will be voting out there aren't mothers, but I would say I've used this line many times that in reflecting on Judge Amy Coney Barrett, this is what a mom can do. A mom can raise children, have a career, have a family, and then become a Supreme Court justice. And I would tell all of our women that we don't need to walk in lockstep with each other. We each should choose our own path, whether it's to be a strong conservative woman, a woman of faith, whether it is to be someone who is on the left of the spectrum. It's up to us to choose our path, and we shouldn't let anybody else tell us what is right or wrong. It is up to us. So I am encouraged. I think the advice that Amy Coney Barrett gave to many young women out there was correct. Don't just let life happen. Be engaged, make those choices.
So one final question. For those who are still undecided of who to vote for between maybe you and Teresa Greenfield or any party ticket, kind of what's your final message? Because we're less than 2 weeks away from November 3rd.
You bet. Well, Iowa is more than a place to me. It is where I was born and raised, most certainly. I live about 6 miles from the farm that I was raised on, but Iowa is truly who I am. Those values that I was raised with, hard work, service, faith, have carried on through the time that I've served as a public local elected official, as well as a state senator, and then into the United States Senate, and certainly during the 23 plus years that I served in our military. I have been very honored to serve Iowans, and I will continue fighting for Iowans. Again, fighting for our farmers because I grew up on a farm, fighting for our veterans because I understand their sacrifices, fighting for working families and single moms because I've had those same struggles, and always fighting for survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault because I've been there myself. And so I will continue to fight for Iowa and the values that have made us a strong state and a strong nation. And if you are looking for a candidate that wants to roll back your Second Amendment gun rights, if you want a candidate that wants to implement radical environmental ideas, if you have a candidate that wants to raise your taxes, then Teresa Greenfield is your candidate. I will not be doing those things, and I will stand up for Iowa's values, and I am humbly asking for your support in the November 3rd election. There's a lot more work to do, and I'm going to keep fighting for Iowa.